When I was 25 years old, I was volunteering at St. Joseph's Medical Center in New York. And after each visit, every day, I would be completely exhausted. So I'd be driving home with my seminary classmate, Guillermo. And he was always so excited after his visits. And then I would recline my seat and just pass out, because his patients could actually speak to him. I was assigned to a floor where basically everyone was nonverbal. Perhaps he had strokes or something like that. So I'd spend about 6 hours trying to have conversations with people and love them. But at most they could really do is just go, mm-hmm. And so when I mentioned this to Sister Dolores, my supervisor, she said, well, maybe you should try visiting another floor. And I said, well, sister, I don't know if I should do that, because the time will come, God willing, if I'm ordained a priest, I'm going to be assigned to things that are going to exhaust me. And she said, that's right, you will. And when the time comes, you will have to carry it out. But when we have the choice, sometimes it's right to choose the assignment that is more life-giving. And so her advice changed a lot for me, because she gave me an insight into Jesus' compassion for me, but also the people I was serving. So we're 3 weeks into our Sabbath summer here. We always say at St. Anthony's, July and August, Sabbath summer, focused on God, on worship, and on renewal. And so the question we're asking today is, how do we take care of our own needs while at the same time taking care of other people's needs? Are we being selfish when we rest? And the answer is, if we're following Jesus, the answer is no. Because in the gospel, he has compassion on his own disciples. They just returned from their mission, and he says to them, come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while. So the apostles, their mission was so fruitful. They were teaching, they were exorcising demons, they were healing. It's so fruitful that the text says they don't even have time to eat. And so Jesus says, his will is, you must rest. Now notice, he actually does something about it, because a lot of us, we all talk about rest, we talk about keeping the Sabbath, but we don't always do it. It says, and they went away in the boat to a deserted place by themselves. I told you last week about a man named Robert Morris. He wrote a book on the Sabbath, and one time Robert was going to have lunch with a friend. So he asked his friend, what are you doing on Thursday? And his friend said, nothing. He says, okay, let's do lunch on Thursday. And his friend says, no, sorry. I have nothing scheduled on Thursday. What I'm going to do on Thursday is nothing. And so his friend explains why. Because a few years ago, he was close to death in the hospital, and his friend complained to God. He said, Lord, I try to serve you. I don't understand why I'm so sick. And apparently God said to him, son, you have been violating my principles. You violate the Sabbath. You're constantly going and doing. You don't rest one day a week. That is the reason for your health problems. I didn't bring this on you. You brought it on yourself. So that's when the friend learned to respect the Sabbath, and he schedules one day every week. He guards it. And we're going to have to learn to do the same in our lives, to respect God's Sabbath. Okay, so that's the first part of Jesus' compassion. He has compassion on us, but he also has compassion on the crowds. It says, as Jesus went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. This is very beautiful. The crowds are so desirous to see Jesus, to be healed by him, to learn from him, that they actually beat the disciples around the lake. So the disciples and Jesus take a boat across the lake, but the crowds, they actually walk around it, and they arrive there ahead of time. They want to see Jesus so badly. And what does he do? He wants his disciples to rest, but because the crowds need him, he interrupts their rest. He has compassion on the crowds. Now, there's no contradiction between Jesus' compassion for us and Jesus' compassion for the crowd. So how do you balance it? You have to have Jesus' heart. You have to be so focused on doing His will. As soon as you're focused on doing God's will, you will never feel guilty about scheduling time to rest. And if you really have Jesus' heart, you will not be angry when you're trying to rest and people interrupt you. Now, what does that mean practically? If you're going to be available to love other people, it doesn't mean you're always ready by your phone, just in case someone calls. I can't go out of town, no. And it certainly doesn't mean you violate the Sabbath. Like, let's say you're a realtor and you want to just make more money, and so you'll take phone calls on Sunday when you actually don't need to. That's not respecting the Sabbath. What it means is that under normal circumstances, if you're going on vacation, go out of town. That's okay. Your work can take care of itself. But let's say you're on vacation and someone interrupts you and God sends someone into your life. Be free to help them. So what should be our state of being? If we get interrupted, how should we respond? St. Vincent de Paul, he wrote to his priests about how they should be interrupted and what their heart should be like. So he said this: if a needy person requires medicine or other help during prayer time, do whatever has to be done with peace of mind. Offer the deed to God as your prayer. Do not become upset or feel guilty because you interrupted your prayer to serve the poor. God is not neglected if you leave Him for such service. One of God's works is merely interrupted so that another can be carried out. So when you leave prayer to serve some poor persons, remember that this very service is performed for God. So most of us err on either side. Either we're so available that we never schedule time to prayer or rest. Now notice St. Vincent de Paul, he got his priests, they schedule time to pray. We all have to do the same, but they're available. On the other hand, some of us, we're so guarded with our time. When people interrupt us, we're irritated. We're annoyed, maybe if our children interrupt us. We have to find the middle virtue. So practically speaking, I want to challenge all of you in the next 12 months. Can you do one retreat in the next 12 months? You need it. And because people in the past have asked me, well, yeah, what? I don't know what to do. Our team has just given a list of retreats, and I'm just going to go through them. We start with Opus Dei retreats. This is at Britannia Beach, 45 minutes away. So lots for women, and then the men. Lots of opportunities. So if we can just hold it, Garrett. That's the men's retreat, very popular. About 250 men go to Princeton once a year. It's coming up. And I think the women's retreat will be in the spring. Then we have Seed and House of Prayer in Kelowna. We have Madonna House locally. They do nights of recollection. Take advantage of that. Then we have some virtual retreats. We have the 30-day challenge with Chris Stefanik. And finally, PRH. A number of our parishioners have taken PRH. They've said it's extremely healing and renewing. So I give you these examples so that none of you can give me excuses when I ask you, maybe you should go on retreat. Now let's say some of you still give me excuses and you say, well, I can't make any of those dates. What I'd recommend to you then is go to Whistler, stay wherever you want there, and go to the one Catholic church in Whistler called Our Lady of the Mountains, and my classmate, Father Andrew LaRue, will welcome you. And when you're there in Whistler, go to daily Mass. He'd love to have you, and he will make himself available for confession. And if you wonder then, well, what am I supposed to do? What do I do during the day? At the back of the church, when you leave on your right, there's a bunch of books that we've selected that can be guides for your retreat. So you've got that. Now let's say you can't even go to Whistler for any time. I mentioned last August 16th about making an oratory in your house. In other words, taking, let's say, one room, one closet, one space, one corner, a place for prayer. Can I just gently ask, how many people have an oratory or a prayer corner in their house? Good for you. Good for you. Well, that's something that would help us focus on the Lord. So right now, Jesus is asking us as a community to rest, focus on loving Him, because in September, we'll have a lot of time for growth. So in September, for those of you who are interested in learning more about Scripture, we're going to have Journey Through Scripture. We're going to have the marriage course for people who want to improve their marriages, and that's something you can invite your non-Catholic friends to. We've got Alpha for people who are exploring faith, and we really want to focus on mission come September. But for now, rest. Last. I told you last week about a woman named Jennifer Fulweiler. She had this life-changing retreat, and that helped her to live from an overflowing tank. I just want to specify what happened on that retreat that was so life-changing. So on the final day of her retreat, all the women go for confession, and the organizers announce, Father George can't come up, a very popular priest, very helpful, because his niece and nephew just died in a car accident 1 hour ago, so Father George can't come. So Jennifer goes to confession, talks to the priest, he gives her life-changing advice. And when she leaves, she looks at the door, and the name written on it is Father George. And she wonders, well, how can that be? And she goes to an organizer, and the answer is, Father George's flight is later in the evening, so he came up here before he asked to leave. And that deeply touched Jennifer, because someone who just suffered a tragedy in her life just changed her life. He made time for her. And so what Father George did was right. He was suffering, so he scheduled time to rest, to go see his family. And he wasn't being selfish. But at the same time, he heard Jesus' call to have compassion on other people.